Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to Wheel Fix Team. All right, what we got going on today is a '09 Hyundai Elantra and doing several things to this car, but one we'll get into because we've covered rear brakes several times over. This one here is real straightforward. Flip the camera around, y'all. Come on, camera. All right, so what I'm really replacing on what this video is about is a wheel bearing. I want to give you a little rundown. So if you're doing this yourself, this is a doable job. You would want to maybe have a good way of steadying the vehicle because you will have to get underneath it. This is a bolt-in wheel bearing. So what it means is after you remove some of the rear brakes, which is the of course the wheel, the brake caliper, the brake caliper mounting bracket. Oh, and an easy trick that I use. These things have this. The rotor is held on by a little Phillips headed Phillips headed screw. Okay, well you're gonna scratch your head and probably say a few choice words trying to get that off. Well, my trick to this is while this thing is mounted on here, while this is mounted onto that, let me get that in the camera. I'll take a punch and I'll just a few good taps right there in the center with it, a couple of good, give it a couple doop doop, don't be scared to knurl this in a little bit because you can take your hammer and tap your bit back in there and that screw will come right out. And I have if you don't have this, but most people do now, and this is as simple as that little impact gun, it zips it right out. And I don't even, once I tap this a couple of times, it actually is hardly any tension at all, so you don't end up breaking the tips off of your bit. If you just stick that in there and jam it on it, it's going to break the tip off. And just putting it back, it doesn't take a whole lot of tension. You just kind of zip it back a little snug, and that's the trick to getting that rotor off. Okay, now next thing we'll be getting the actual bolts out of the back over here. So you can see this emergency brake is not incorporated with the rear brake caliper. It's actually its own set, and it runs off the inside of the drum here, or that drum inside the rotor, which is kind of its own little drum. Okay, there's bolts on the back side. Let me see if I can get them in camera here. You could do this without a lift, but it's a little bit cumbersome. You got 4 bolts. There's one right here. I'll get my finger on there. There's one at the bottom, and on the inside there's a couple more, and they're with the right extension. Oh, a little better view there I got on my creeper, and I'll just access that bolt from here on the back side, and the other side I won't be able. The shock's going to be in the way a little bit, but I believe I can either use my offset wrench or this right here. But my favorite go-to is you can buy this off of eBay, which is it's a 3/8 drive high torque impact, and it's got super awesome power. I can use that up in here to zip those bolts off. And once I remove those bolts, you've got a speed sensor right here. Let me get that in there. Let me get my light. Forgive me. Get it on there. Wow, the lighting's bad. Let me get my phone this here. Speed sensor when I can get my. It should be fine. I'm not going to do anything with it. Some of them you have to take out. There's the speed sensor right there. I'll take the bolt out and just pull it back. Sometimes these things get rusted in there and you'll damage them trying to remove it, but I'm gonna take it loose and just pull it back. Most of the time they'll clear, but just for good measure I'll move it, and then I'll squirt some oil between the packing plate and that bearing, and then I'll use a hammer and I'll tap down here, and then I'll tap over here, and I'll tap, and eventually it'll work itself right on out. All right, here we go. All right, so I've got all the bolts out of the back and everything, and so pretty much just gonna hit right there. It's starting to come out now. Be prepared for the whole thing to go flopping, and don't worry about that. It's okay. It's okay. So we've got her. Okay. I know you're looking at something else here, but here it is. Get the backing plate off. It's actually using this bearing to kind of sandwich it all together. And there it is. And this little ring that you see on the back is what the speed sensor would read off of right here. It's got a little sensor it's got a magnetic end on it, and it actually, when you get the camera to focus, you can see that the end has sort of got a magnetism to it, and it's designed to actually fluctuate in a square wave pattern when this little reluctor ring is moving along, it has a pulse rate because the magnetic field changes due to the fact that it gets closer and further away from the source of magnetic field disruption. And then the faster it moves, the more signal it gets. And what this thing is doing is relaying messages to the ABS module to allow the computer to know what each individual wheel speed is, and it can apply brake pressure accordingly under some kind of hard or adverse braking condition. Now, I turned it earlier. It doesn't sound like a lot. When you drive this thing though, it was just roaring down the road. It sounded like a clopped tire, or a tire with a whop in it, It was just grinding real bad. And basically, what we'll end up doing is putting it back together the same way. Is you'll note that this bearing has a little difference in it. It's flat across the bottom, and it got a little hump at the top right there. So when you're going to put that back together, just look closely and see. You can see pretty clear it just flat at the bottom. A little hump at the top there. You'll put it together, sandwich it together, and a dab of Loctite on these bolts here. I don't see anything wrong with that. If you feel like you want to do that, you can. It's usually they don't back out. I'll put a little dab on there just to make sure. And it'll get a new brake rotor and a new brake pads. Then we'll move on to the front. We'll have a control arm to change on the front upper. But yeah, that's pretty much bearing removal. And putting it back together is just as simple. Once you got all the bolts broke loose, it's back easy. You can go right back with it. Thank you very much for tuning in. 09 Hyundai Elantra. There we go. 09 Hyundai Elantra. Wheel bearing. Thank you for tuning in the Wheel Fixing team. You guys are awesome. Appreciate it so much, guys.